Well, hello Internet. It is the first day of my 2024 West off-road trip, and strangely enough I decided to stop at a cemetery in Moorhead, Minnesota. I'm on my way to the middle of North Dakota, a little town called Leeds where my family grew up. And the reason I stopped at this cemetery is that some of my maternal grandparents' family ended up here, and between today and tomorrow I'll call this let's see, I think it'd be Dia de los Parientes Muertos, Dead Relatives Day. So whether or not that's a proper term, I don't know, but what I thought I would share is, especially over here, here's the grave of my great aunt Ethel Hughes and her husband Walt, my uncle. And Ethel was one of those people that back in the day, 100 years ago, she was a flapper. And my daughters were especially happy to know that they had flapper DNA, that rebellious spirit in our family. Ethel was an amazing person. I wish I had been older and got to know her the ages that I am now, but she unfortunately died in 1983, so I was just kind of barely into my 20s trying to figure out what life was all about. But what I do remember, well actually the story is, and I don't remember this because I was so little, is we would come and visit Ethel and Walt in their house. They lived in Fargo, just across the river here from Moorhead. And one trip when I was 4, and it was just before we moved to Panama, they had a really small house. I mean, it was like 2 bedrooms and, you know, a kitchen, living room, not much space at all. But anyway, I had wandered off and was in, I think it was their 2nd bedroom, and my Aunt Ethel came in and found me just kind of talking to myself, playing whatever, having a whole conversation. And she asked me who I was talking to, and I said, well, it's my imaginary friend. And she, I'm sure, asked me some questions about this imaginary friend. I don't remember, of course, any of this, but what I do remember from the story later is that she suggested, because we were heading to Panama, that I leave my imaginary friend in her closet, which apparently I did. And never thought of it again. Again, no memory whatsoever. So fast forward to about 20 years later, so that would have been in 1962-ish. So fast forward 20 years later to 1982, my oldest sister Lynn and my niece Jenny, who was 4 at that time, had come here to Fargo to visit Ethel, and all of a sudden Ethel heard Jenny in their spare bedroom talking up a storm, having a grand old time, and Ethel went in and Lynn went with her and asked Jenny, what are you doing? And this sweet innocent 4-year-old child that she was said, oh, I found this imaginary friend in the closet and we're playing. Of course, then my Aunt Ethel remembered me leaving my imaginary friend in that same closet. Kind of freaked her out a little bit. Told my sister Lynn about the story. Jenny doesn't really remember much of it, but it was one of those of, I don't know what to make of it. I'll just say it happened to be the same age. Jenny was 4, I was 4, the same room, the same closet, the same imaginary friend. And from what I understand, it was a male entity, or Jenny called this imaginary friend him, and said he was about 2.5. So, I don't know what to make of it, but Ethel has always had a fond place in my heart. Her husband Walt was a very good man. He drove a bus for years and years for the city of Fargo. We used to joke about him taking a bus driver's holiday, which is, you get a day off and you ride around the city on the bus. Anyway, they were great people, and they used to be part of the gatherings at every July 4th that we'd have out on my grandparents' farm. We would see them every 2 years when we'd come up from Panama. And I think of Ethel and Walt frequently, but especially that story that, again, don't know that I meant to ever freak Ethel out, but apparently something happened. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't know how to explain it. Somewhere in this lovely cemetery, this evergreen cemetery in Moorhead, are other Westerberg relatives. I don't know where they are. Someday maybe I'll come back and try and find them, but for right now I just wanted to at least find Ethel and Walt here under this lovely tree and say hello to them. Okay, this is the second stop on the Dia de los Parientes Muertos, the Dead Relatives Day. We are in Hillsboro, North Dakota, which is about halfway between Fargo and Grand Forks. So where I had stopped earlier at the Evergreen Cemetery, a little ways north of there. And this cool little cemetery is in the outskirts of a town named Hillsboro. Unfortunately, you can probably see the train in the background there. It's surrounded on one side by railroad tracks and by freeway Interstate 29 on the other. But in this cemetery, there are, I just did a quick walkthrough, there are a lot of Hansens in here. Our name originally was Hansen. This is the grave site of Hans Hansen Baglien, who is the originator of the Baglien name in America. So anyone that has the last name Baglien, I can trace my relations back to this one of multiple brothers that came here and decided that Hansen was too common of a name, and they were going to change it to the same name as the farm had in Norway, which actually was Baglien, which was B-A-K-L-I-E-N, or some derivative of that, and they changed it to Baglien once they got here. So this would be my, let's see, there's my dad, David, his dad, Benjamin, my grandpa Benjamin, my great-grandpa Ole, and this would be my great-great-grandpa Hans Hansen Baglien. So for my three progeny, this would be their 3 times great-grandpa, kind of that origination point of the Baglien name. So just kind of an interesting fact. Don't know too much about him, unfortunately. It's the old thing of, as time goes on, the living memories of the people start to fade. The one thing I did read in our story, our family history, is there's one other grave here next to Hans. It's this one here of a guy named Clarence Baglien, that according to the family history, Clarence went to the University of Minnesota, became I think they called it a chemist, like a pharmacist, but he was 22 years old living in St. Paul, and he died under suspicious circumstances, which no one ever figured out whether it was murder or suicide. So he would have been, I guess, my great-great uncle. And it's interesting to me that here we have this whole huge cemetery. It goes back quite a few acres, but just this one headstone, or I guess you'd call it a obelisk type thing, right on the corner, outer edge, and that's where we trace our name back to. Anyway, moving on.